Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review, and today we're looking at the Martin SN022 Pilot Watch. This is a watch I looked at on San Martin's website and also on Aliexpress, and I looked at this watch and I thought, there's a San Martin out there for me. I don't want another dive watch. I've got plenty of dive watches. I don't think another San Martin dive watch is all that different from the other watches that I have already. Is there anything out there in the San Martin wheelhouse that's any good? And this watch came across my eyes, and I'll tell you what, every time I wear this watch, every time I look at it, I like this watch. It is so incredibly simplified, and honestly, I love the text for San Martin on this one. I know that San Martin's gotten a black eye over the years from a number of YouTube guys out there and gals when it comes down to the logo that they use or the symbol not being the same all the way around, that kind of thing. I love the script that they have for the San Martin brand name on this dial. So extremely simple dial, San Martin quality construction. Let's get into this watch and talk about this watch for the 5 things that we typically go through: size, fitment, finish, accuracy, then legibility and lume, and we'll have some conclusions at the end. All right, let's get into this watch. I really, really like the design of this watch. There's a lot of anticipation I have in doing this review. I've written a number of things down. There's a few things that as I take a closer look, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think one of the things is going to resolve itself with a little bit of time. And I know it's ironic we're talking about watches, and the problem being resolved by time, but at least we'll know what time it is when it gets resolved. Just keep it going. All right, so let's go on with size. The size of this watch is a 38 millimeter case. It's 13 millimeters tall. It's a little bit on the thicker side, and it's a 38 millimeter case, so this is getting on the chunky side. So I did a review just not too long ago on the Zello Swordfish Field bronze case, and the proportions of that watch were kind of in that chunky zone. This is a little bit more chunky than that watch. So this is getting into that. It has a higher profile off the top of the wrist. And whenever that happens, the next thing I look for is a sapphire crystal. Because anytime that watch sticks up higher on the wrist, I want to make sure that the crystal doesn't get unnecessary scratches on there to really mess up not only the view of the dial itself, but any kind of light reflections, lume, kind of that low light kind of reading of the dial kind of thing. So this watch has kind of the typical dive weight to it as well. So when you look at this watch, and it's stainless steel bracelet, stainless steel case, it's a chunkier watch, it's going to have some weight to it. So even though it's a pilot watch, it's going to feel like a diver watch without the bezel. So keep that in mind when it comes down to the overall weight. I think this is a watch that fits pretty much the typical diver. If you've had divers before, this is going to fit you just fine. If you have a smaller wrist, I think this proportion, the height and the width proportion, is going to start to stand out a little bit more on a smaller wrist. Even though the dial is smaller, 38 millimeter, I think the height, the 13 millimeter height, is going to be something that you'll notice a little bit more off the wrist. So keep that in mind. Also, it's a 20 millimeter between the lug measurements, so you can swap out straps, swap out the bracelet for straps, put whatever strap we want on there, and kind of downgrade it from kind of that tooly stainless steel bracelet into something a little softer, maybe a little bit more warm, like leather or a nylon strap or something like that. So overall fitment, you have easy adjustments on here, screw-in links, and they worked awesome. It was so easy to do this. I love working with San Martin watches for that reason. You have only 2 micro adjusts. Ding, 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 ding. And I don't mean like, winner, winner, chicken dinner. I mean, this is a problem, because this watch is a little bit more difficult to get to fit a little more snugly, especially with the proportions we're talking about here with only 2 micro adjusts. So in my opinion, this clasp does not work well with this design of this watch. It should have at least 3 micro adjusts. And again, my preference is always 4, which means you have 3 micro adjusts that you can work with. So to me, the fitment of this watch, it's a little bit questionable. It does fit me okay, but it's a heavier watch. I wish I could get it just a little bit more snug on the wrist. And to do that, I have to take out links or work with 1 micro adjust, and so far I haven't found the right combination. So, give it time. Every few months, I'm doing different activities. My wrist size probably changes as a result of that as well. So maybe it'll fit better in a few months or whatnot. It could be all about me and my body changing over time. So we'll leave it up to that and see if that actually helps. Now let's go on to finish. The finish of this watch, let's start off with the crystal. It's a sapphire crystal with an AR coating. It is a domed crystal, slight dome to it. So you're going to get a little bit of distortion on this watch overall, but I think it does a great job. Kind of gives that classy look to it. With a sapphire crystal, you're going to get a nice crystal clean look through the crystal into the dial. This is a full lume dial. So when you look at the dial of this watch, it has kind of that white, but almost just a little hint of greenish blue tint to it. And I mean just a hint to it, because it's not that difficult, because I think, or it's not that obvious. I've seen other watches that have full lume dials that look almost green. The MDC Infantry, it's a full lume dial. It has more of a green tint to it. This one really does not have hardly a green tint to it at all. So I really like that as far as the finish goes. 12, 3, 6, and 9. I mean, when it comes down to the overall layout of the dial, super easy to read. The hour markers are all printed on there. It's great. They're blacked out handset, hour, minute, second hands are all blacked out, which is a great pairing. That's the best pairing you can have with a full lume dial. I don't like to have full lume dials that also have full lume hands on there, because it just makes the daylight legibility of the watch much more in question. Even the nighttime legibility, when you have all of that lume going on, you're relying on the black outlining on the hands, and I just don't think it's enough. So I really like the total blackout of the hour, minute, and second hands. Deep, just blackout basically of the 12, 3, and 6, the hour markers, minute track, all of that. Great finishing. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about the bracelet. It's a 5-link bracelet. This is the other, I would say, significant issue with this watch, but this is the issue I think that can resolve itself over time, because I think the machining on the 5-link bracelet is just a little too rough, meaning that the links themselves kind of catch in different positions, and you just have to, I don't know, just flick them a little bit and they just fold right back to where they're supposed to be. So I think there's maybe a little bit of grit in there. The machining is not quite as polished or is not quite as refined. So you just don't get that free moving bracelet right now. Over time, it's going to wear down. It's going to be just fine. It won't be a problem for sure. So I love the bracelet design. I love the 5-link design. I think it adds a tooliness to this watch that's really, really interesting, if you ask me, because this is a pilot watch. You've got the onion crown on the side. All of this together really makes this watch look like a good, usable tool watch. Let's talk about the clasp. Again, the clasp only has 2 micro adjusts. I'm not a huge fan of that at all. But the overall 2-piece clasp on the inside is milled, solid lockup on it. You have 2 pushers on the sides to release the clasp. This is a really high quality clasp. So overall, when it comes down to the finish of this watch, I really like the finish of this watch. It has brushed side casing on here. The side of the case is all brushed. You've got brushed finishing on the bracelet itself. I don't notice any high polish on the inner part of the link. Sometimes they sneak that in there. That's all brushed as well. You have a much finer brushing maybe, but it's definitely not polished on the bezel, which is kind of a beveled bezel around the crystal. And so overall, this watch has that tool look to it. I don't see any flash on here at all. And because of the setup of this watch, this is a great work watch. If you need a watch, and like me, have reading glasses, and you want something that's super legible, easy to read, this is the watch for you. I love the size of this watch. There's no bezel on here, so the dial uses up all the real estate. You get massive 12369 numbers on there. The hands are all blacked out. The contrast is super high. I'm getting into legibility right now. Let's do it. The legibility of this watch is off the charts. I love this. It's black and white. You can't get any more contrast than that. It's super simple dial, super easy to read. You have a YN55 movement, which is an Epson movement. It's an automatic. It's a 21K movement with a 40-hour power reserve. So this is kind of your typical Seiko style movement, but it's an Epson movement. So it's a sister company of Seiko, but it does a great job of just keeping time. It's all within spec, no issues. And an Epson movement is one of those, like the Seiko, time-tested, proven movement. I have no issue. I have no concerns with this watch going forward. So the overall, components to this watch, I find this watch to be fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I'm really glad I purchased this watch. I think it's going to be an awesome watch to wear around for a variety of occasions. And I think I'm going to wear this for a semi-casual, or semi-formal occasion, because I do think it can pull it off. Also with the movement, you have hacking and hand winding. The typical error of the watch as far as timekeeping goes is negative to plus 35 seconds a day, which is kind of your typical Seiko style error when it comes down to seconds per day. So really no issues around accuracy whatsoever. So let's kind of finish up on the overview and conclusions about this watch. The dial on this is great. The lume on this, it's a full lume dial. It lasts all night. It is something that's easy to read because it's blackout. It uses the entire dial. There's no other stuff on there to distract you from telling the time. This is one of the best dials as far as simplicity and usefulness I have ever come across. Of any watch that I have, I think it might be the other one that comes close to this is probably the Zelos Hammerhead, which is another full lume dial, blackout hands, very simple to read. So there's this pattern here that I think when you make things really, really simple, it is just a joy to wear. I love wearing this watch. There is only the text of the company on there, and I love the script text of San Martin at the top. I think it adds some classiness to it. You've got that onion crown on there. Those two things together add a little bit of class to this. You've got the 5-link engineer style bracelet, which adds a little bit of flash, even though it's brush finished. It adds a little bit of a flash to the watch. So maybe you can pull off a semi-formal with this one. I do have some photos here with it on a suit, and I think it's okay. I think it works fine, and I don't have any issues myself wearing it. I wore a Pathfinder as an administrator of the school district for years. I had no problems with it. So in that way, I guess I'm not probably the best opinion as far as fashion goes, but this one I think you could probably pull it off for a semi-formal suit and tie type situation. What are the downsides to this? The clasp. The 2 micro adjusts on the clasp is just not enough. It needs to be, with the amount of weight that this watch is throwing around, it needs to be, the ability to fine-tune this needs to be there. I would love to see it have an on-the-fly adjustable clasp. I think that would solve all of this. And because of the size of this watch, it's a little bit on the chunkier side as far as proportions go. I think it addresses that issue too, because those types of watches you typically need to have more snug on the wrist because there's such a high profile of that watch above the wrist. So what's the overall score for this watch? 9.6 out of 10. Highly recommend this watch. Part of that 9.6 out of 10 has to do with the bracelet, and some of the machining is just not quite refined enough, but I think over time that's going to wear itself out and it'll be probably more of a 9.8. So I really, really like this watch design. I love the dial design. I love the full lume. Can't recommend this one enough. So put in the comments down below what you think of San Martin, what you think of this watch, other San Martins that are out there, or other watches that have extremely simple dials. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear review. We'll catch you guys next time.